Welcome to BusinessCake. This is a show for people who build their ideas. Today, Patrick and I sit down with Danielle Laughlin, who is the owner and founder of Sage Business Counsel. Danielle's personal mission is to eradicate what she calls entrepreneurial poverty. This comes out of her life story and a passion that she has that came both personally and professionally for her. She, as a single mother, raising a young child, worked her way through law school and launched her career. Then her father faced bankruptcy with his business. And at the firm at which she was working, she faced and worked with a lot of other business owners who just didn't have the basic understanding. So as they were building their businesses, they found themselves in trouble, and she was often working with bankruptcy clients. She shares how at one of the lowest points of her life, being a single mom, being depressed, not finding any fulfillment or satisfaction in her work, and just struggling, she came to a surprising realization that she needed to step out from the firm and launch her own practice. It's not a usual realization I think people would come to. So we dive into all of that. We dive into what she does now, and some of the things that we hit on, how working with lawyers is so much about fit and timing, how integrity and perseverance matter. Just do not give up in what you're doing and what you feel strongly and passionate about. And then starting simple so that as you grow, then you can become more complex. This is a great conversation. It's different. I think you're really going to enjoy listening to Danielle's story, hearing her passion, and you may even walk out with something for your own business or idea that you're working on. Just a quick disclaimer. Patrick has technical issues in this, so he's in and out. It's mostly a conversation with me and Danielle, and then Patrick's able to jump in when he's there. So thanks for your patience with us as we work through that, but I think you're going to enjoy this. Let's jump in. To start though, as you and I are just, we're just meeting, give me like just a brief bio snapshot of Danielle and maybe who you are, where you've come from, and then, today.
Yeah, great. Brief bio. Well, I don't know how far back I should go, but I guess I'll just say I was raised in my young childhood in rural Alabama mostly, and I grew up pretty poor. And then around middle school, I essentially lived in Georgia, right? So Columbus, Georgia, if you're familiar with that. And so I was always very academically gifted, and it's been a great gift of my life to have that ability. And so I just sort of was a super nerd, and I knew I wanted to be a lawyer when I was 9. I actually broke my ankle, and so I couldn't take the bus, right? So I had these crutches, and I had to. My granny would pick me up from school instead of taking the bus, and I'd watch Matlock and Perry Mason with her. And that's when I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. That was the first I ever even knew what a lawyer was, and I wanted to be Matlock. And then, I, like a lot of youngsters, went through high school and college a little more wild, a little more free, and not quite as grounded. But I studied philosophy, and I almost majored in world religions. I was like a credit away from kind of a double major there, and with, or I guess I should say a minor, not a major, with world religions. So I studied like political philosophy and ethics and religion, kind of all that, like how do we work together in society, like groups of people. And then about 2 weeks before my college graduation, I noticed that my skirt was not really fitting me very well. And I thought it was just, gaining some weight, but turns out I was actually pregnant. I was not married, so,
Surprise.
it was just one of those things. And so essentially right after I graduated college, I was just pregnant, right? And so I had planned to go to law school. Of course, I did, eventually. I actually took the LSAT when I was about 5 months pregnant. And I ended up starting law school about a year after my son was born. And so I did fulfill the dream to become a lawyer, but it was kind of a rocky road to get there, I guess you'd say. And so I became a single mom actually pretty quickly. You might imagine we weren't married, therefore we really didn't have that core of a relationship.
Yeah.
Not to say that you can't, just saying we didn't. And so we didn't last very long, unfortunately, for my son. But, I raised him for about 7 years by myself and finished law school and started the firm. And
What age were you about? Was that like 20 to 27, 22 to 29?
yeah, so, wow, great question. So I graduated law school, I think that was 2011. So, yeah, I was 29 at that time. So by the time I had started law school, I was right at 25.
Okay.
I had my son at 24 and then, yeah.
Started at 25 and we're done by 29. I mean, 4 years, single mom, going through law school, that's no joke.
Yeah. It was actually 3 years, so maybe my math's off there, but yeah, I
still very challenging and hard.
Yeah, it's even harder. It's like you stuck to the timeline for law school. Like that's wild.
I gotta say, I was made for law school. I loved it, and I was very good at it. And I was cum laude. I mean, I was I wasn't at the top of the class, but I did graduate with honors. I don't know. I think it was the philosophy, the rigorous kind of undergrad that really allowed me to be able to discern logically, like how things should go. And I think for some of the other classmates, that was a bigger leap. I had been used to that Socratic method already.
And do you currently practice what you, I guess, after graduating, the law firm you went into or the practice you were in? Like, how has that changed over the years, or what do you practice now?
Yeah. Love this. I'm like reliving this. So when I came out of law school, it was 2011, right? So we're in the thick of the Great Recession.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little traumatic, if I'm being honest, because I had done all the right things, quote unquote, that I was supposed to be doing. The law review, all the things. I mean, the resume they tell you to get, I got it. And I did it, as I just said, as a single mom. I was very proud of what I had done. I had recommendations from my dean at the law school to, get jobs and things, but there were just no jobs, right? Like there were no jobs. The 2 jobs that I interviewed for, one was to go and do legal malpractice suing other lawyers, which I thought,
okay,
right out the gate, maybe I'm not the best one to discern.
It's a good way to build a network, I guess.
Like I'm not going to make any friends if I so that was one option. And then the other option was to go work at a foreclosure law firm where I could take people's houses from them. So it was kind of, a little abysmal.
Mm-hmm.
Not to denigrate those practice areas, but as a fresh young lawyer,
it's not the happiest sides of law.
Yeah. Not the happiest sides of law. Not the happiest sides of law. Absolutely. So I chose to go to the foreclosure firm. It was a bigger firm, a multi-state firm. And I did not want to do like tort law, malpractice, tort law type of stuff, what we would consider kind of this personal injury idea. I was very interested in trial work, but I was also very interested in business and real estate and that kind of thing. So the foreclosure firm was the best option of those 2, given the kind of long play. But I always knew in law school that I would start my practice. So I had a plan to start my practice within 5 years of graduating, and I did. I started I started the firm about not quite 4 years after I practiced with that firm. Basically, the idea was, I worked there. I was helping the banks. I learned a lot there because being in the bankruptcy court, I saw all the debtor filings, and so I was the one that was doing like the more complicated stuff, like Chapter 11 defense. So that's where businesses reorg, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would see like businesses coming through bankruptcy and restructuring, and just like how people were mismanaging their companies. I mean, just there was a lot of problems with the banks. That's a whole other deal. But there was also just a lot of I don't know, mismanagement, maybe misunderstanding. Like, just because you can get that debt or give that equity doesn't necessarily mean that you should, right? And so there was a lot of that type of stuff where it was like, I see what you did there, but
So
was
is that kind of what you want to help people understand now, and like what you're aimed at teaching, I guess?
Yeah, actually, I guess an important point of the story there is my dad's business actually had to file bankruptcy. So 2013-ish, if I remember correctly, was a turbulent year. But that year, my dad called me and said, I got to talk to you about this business bankruptcy. And I'm like, what? So my dad had a commercial construction company down in Louisiana, down in your parts there, Will, doing a lot of work down in Oklahoma, Texas, and all the things. They were pretty successful. I don't know the reality of his business because I was never really involved, and we didn't talk much about that. So, I don't want to pretend like I actually have the details. But my understanding was, it was probably a $7 million revenue a year. I didn't really know much about profitability or anything, but in hindsight, I guess it wasn't that great because it didn't take very long for them to have to wind up. But the shock, I guess, of that phone call was like, oh, wow. And I couldn't help him because he's like in a different state. I didn't know much about his side of it. I knew my bank side of it, but I had studied corporate law, in law school. So I was a big nerd. I made 100 in corporate law. That was like my jam.
You enjoyed that one. Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I don't know what it was. I think it's just the strategy, when you understand, corporate stock, I guess, and kind of how you can leverage it and use it and do fun things, So I really kind of nerded out on corporate law. So I knew that, I guess the story I was getting from my dad maybe wasn't exactly well informed. Like, he didn't have lawyers, accountants. I'm sure he had a tax accountant that was filing his taxes, but like, I don't know that they had an accountant running books or auditing anything or advising them, right? Like you do, right, Patrick? So I don't think he had financial insight. He largely left that to his partner. My dad he was blue collar. So I told you I grew up really poor. My dad was the worker, and he knew how to build, these were fire protection. So like sprinkler heads that you'll see in commercial buildings, he did like that part. So fire protection and safety. And he was amazing at it. My dad was an uneducated guy, but absolutely brilliant.
This is stupid.
And so he had a lot of, I think, mistrust in people like you and I, Patrick. Like this idea that we would maybe, I don't know, talk over his head, lawyers were bad type of idea. So I think, ultimately, I don't know, it didn't work for him. And I'm sure there's a lot of other reasons why. So that was a big pivot in my life. And I will also say during that time, I also had one of my closest friends that I had ever had in my life. And and also her family was experiencing, bankruptcy, and a lot of people were. I mean, a lot of people were. So it wasn't really
Was theirs
unique.
also for a business, or it was personal bankruptcy?
More personal,
Okay.
more personal stuff. And so, but I think it was like driven a lot by some health related stuff, right? So a lot of times, it's health debt, medical debt, and things like that people face. And so it was kind of depressing, right? Just seeing people having to go through bankruptcy, going to court, taking these houses. And I would do what I could to try to help people get more time. And it was there that I had like probably one of the most profound experiences I had ever had, which was we're going to court to try to, get this person to pay the mortgage so they can keep the house. They can't afford it. They can't pay it. I say, okay, well, I'm going to come back in 30 days. We'll reset this hearing so that we can give you some more time. And then come back the next time. And unfortunately, the circumstances had not changed. So I said, I'm really sorry. I got to go forward with the judge today and get this order. So we're leaving the courtroom, and he says to me, thank you. And I was like, what are you talking about? I just got permission to hand your house to my foreclosure department. Like, I don't know what you mean, right?
Right. Yeah.
And he said, well, you have a job to do.
my gosh.
You were pleasant but firm. And I mean, even now, like, I literally am fighting back the tear. I almost cried. Like, I was seriously like, wow. So I had kind of these, I don't know, people talk about this, like, God, I'm a religious person. I mean, I don't know if I'm super religious, but I believe in God, and I trust God, I think. So, like, looking back, I see kind of these little breadcrumbs. And, I think it was Steve Jobs who said, like, hindsight, you can kind of see the path. So it was like that experience, my dad's experience. I was suffering some very deep depression, I think, just related to
surprise.
I don't want to blame that on my job. I actually enjoyed my work environment very much, the people that I worked with. I didn't enjoy the work. I didn't enjoy working for the banks, if I'm, being honest.
Yeah.
And I was a single mom with no financial support and no family around. So I was also in this kind of depression. And finally I was like, okay, things got to change. So then I launched the firm. And that was kind of the culmination. And I think back to the question of, is that what I want to teach people? Yeah, I think what I want to teach people is, first of all, don't make assumptions about your professionals, right? Lawyers are people, accountants are people. We get a bad rap sometimes. I think, this idea that we're going to kill the deal.
Right. Yeah.
We're going to kill the deal. We're going to say no. We're going to, and it's like, look, sometimes the answer is no, not a good idea. But sometimes that's good for you. And and so I think really the purpose that I've found is, I'm just like you. I'm just like every other person. So just because I have this title, lawyer, or accountant, whatever.
Esquire,
like I just want people to understand good lawyers can be very beneficial for their business.
Yes.
And so I all of that experience, I think, is what I kind of brought into the firm to try to help businesses.
Well, and I've heard successful businessmen say, like, you want to talk to a lawyer as little as possible. Like, do everything that you can, and then make the time with the lawyer as small and as little as possible. I need you for this very specific thing, and then keep going. I think I come from a corporate background in tech, and had to learn how to work with our law and legal department and our counsel. Yeah. And I think I grew to appreciate the kinds of counsel that comes with that. And there's some I worked with better. And so the idea of fit, like, there's just some lawyers that you can find a good fit with and work with, and they'll understand, and they're not trying to take advantage. It's like you can have that trust and then go more out of a partnership rather than just a transaction. But it starts with, I think what you're underscoring is seeing the other person as a human and a person, and like they're coming and trying to do a good job. And relating to them on that. I want to jump real quick, Danielle, because you're two things. Like, one is you're talking about this really intense time, couple of illuminating moments, probably based off the interactions or the situation that was happening, where you saw the kinds of law or the kind of work that you want to do. But then the other one, you were talking about your state, like you're in a state of depression. And so one is what kind of law firm did you start? Like, what did you want to practice? What was the work you wanted to do? But maybe before you answer that one, you're in this mindset of depression. And out of that, you said, okay, I'm going to start something new. I'm going to go out. I'm going to take this huge risk and launch, which is, I think, not, especially when it's just not a usual step that somebody would take. So how did you get there?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying I've never really been a usual type of person. So
love it.
I always kind of was, I don't know, different maybe. But so while I was in law school, a couple of friends and I, and it wasn't my idea, I was just kind of part of this founding group of law students, and we started the Be Your Own Boss Club. And what we were doing is, we're pulling up our calculator. Back then it was an actual calculator, not your cell phone. But, we got our calculators out and we're like, man, we got to bill how many hours? We got to, if I have to bill 2,000 hours a year, then when do I pee? When do I eat? When do I take vacation? And so we realized that the big law model was definitely not what we were looking for. And like I said, my dad had been an entrepreneur, so I was very interested in entrepreneurship. I think the reason that I wanted to go ahead and launch it then was that I kind of recognized that my depression was stemming from the fact that I didn't have full control over what I was doing. So I had to work for clients that my partners told me to work for. I had to be there when they told me to be there. I was a single mom, so if I couldn't, and they were very flexible. They were. But, if I had an emergency, the expectation was you deal with the emergency and then you pick your laptop up that night and you get back to work, right?
Right.
And so I think I just realized that I didn't want to answer to other people in that way. I later, now as an entrepreneur, know that instead of having, the handful of bosses that I had, I now have all of my clients as bosses and my team as bosses. Right. And also my 4 children as bosses, right? I've got a lot more bosses in my life. But I guess I just didn't really want to be under somebody else's control. I've always been kind of rebellious like that, I guess. And so, yeah, I think that was one of the reasons. I think another reason was just the curiosity of doing what I wanted to do. I wanted to do business. And I guess I should say this too, because this also played into it. I was bored out of my mind in the bankruptcy court. I mean, it was just, it's very emotion driven, like very kind of templatized type of law. I mean, just very like monotonous. And I had been hired into the litigation department, but the associate in the bankruptcy department went on maternity leave. And so they asked me if I would go. And I was like, well, I need a job. So if that's what it takes to get this job, sure. So after these 3.5 years, I'm continuously asking to be moved over into the litigation department. Now, I don't know for certain, but my suspicion is that my partner, the bankruptcy partner, didn't want me to leave her because I was doing a lot for her and I loved her. We had a great relationship. She's great. And so I don't know if maybe it was just like, no, please. I don't have any other lawyers here to handle what she handles because I was doing kind of complicated stuff in the department. But also I had some interesting relationships with the lawyers in the litigation department too. And one of whom is now a friend, I would say. But we had sort of this interesting dynamic. And I don't know, there was just some politics at play maybe that I wasn't fully aware of. But they wouldn't move me.
But it was it was keeping you from moving into the work
correct
that you would probably be more fulfilled by, I guess.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So it was like I was working for clients I didn't really want to work for, doing work I didn't really want to do.
Sure.
It's like,
Yeah.
as much as I liked my boss and my colleagues. So yeah, I think that was it. And then, I guess to answer the next question, what kind of company did I start? Well,
If I could real quick
yeah,
recap that. So from what I'm hearing you say, like one was a measure of control. You
yeah,
probably have these other situations in your life that you can't control, but your work was one of them. I can
correct.
change this. And then the second one was tied into that, like doing work that you maybe it was significant, you were fulfilled by, it was challenging, it wasn't boring. So those two things together, instead of finding a firm, you said, I'm gonna make my own path.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So then your
um,
path, like what did you make? What do you do?
so when I first started, of course, I wasn't bringing any clients, so I'm literally like bootstrap startup here.
Yeah.
But fortunately, as a lawyer, all I really needed was my laptop and the suits in my closet, to make it work. So I started out in my 2-bedroom apartment in the dining room. I put a desk there instead of a dining room table and kind of made that my home office. And then, initially the concept was asset protection. It was going to
Okay.
be business, real estate, and estate planning. And those were things I had been in commercial real estate before law school, so I knew that, very well. And business, of course, I studied that, and then estate planning. I had done some independent study work with a woman named Mary Radford, and she's brilliant, absolutely brilliant lawyer. But she's kind of one of the preeminent trust and estate attorneys in the country, and she and I had done an independent study together in law school. And so I had, growing up poor, I knew that the best way I could help other poor people was to help them with asset protection, their businesses, their properties, and their money, right? So that was the first idea. Now, later, I didn't know anything about running a business. As much as you can make 100 in corporate law,
Right.
it doesn't tell you anything about actually running a business. I don't think I felt that way at the time. I thought I felt very confident
Sure.
in it then. But yeah, you know how it is. So then you start to realize you really don't know as much as you thought you knew. And
Uh-huh.
so that's kind of how it started. And it, like most bootstraps, it kind of just, grew organically. One thing so the lawyer that I mentioned previously, that was a colleague at my old firm, he had gone on to another firm, a competitor. And when I launched out, he reached out to me to do contract work for them, handling their bankruptcy portfolio. So I did that for that firm. It was a larger firm. And then I also picked up some other work like that for a firm that's in Florida and Georgia, other states. So I kind of picked up these contract 1099 bankruptcy work portfolios. And that was kind of like my monthly fixed income. I knew I was going to make that amount of money every month.
Mm-hmm.
So that really helped in the beginning. And then I did some indigent criminal defense work. So that was quite interesting. But, the government pays for those lawyers. So it was paying like, $65 an hour or something like this. And I'm like, I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
So I started,
It's
just
something.
basically, just
Yeah.
picking up whatever I could. And and then moved in, shared space with another law firm. And then eventually I moved to Sugar Hill where I met Patrick and got my own place. That was in 2017. So I launched in February 2015. And then April 2017, I got my first office by myself. And I was just thrilled. I thought I just
You
made
made
it,
it.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. And so as far as how your practice has evolved since then, so you started out thinking asset protection, estate planning, those things. What do you do now?
So, I still do those things, I think, but we just niched our marketing to business only.
Okay.
And in terms of like when you say you do real estate and estate planning, well, people come to you, they just want a will. And it's just, one individual, they got no assets really. I'm like, we're not doing much asset protection here. We're just preventing your money from going into probate. I mean, it still probates, but, it's not as public, I guess, how you distribute. So it was like, I don't want to be doing that. Because I hadn't practiced in those areas before I started the firm, those were things I just didn't really think about or know about. So as I go out and I tell people that I do real estate and estate planning and business, I'm getting really sucked into probate, low-level estate work. I just need a deed today. It's like killing me smalls, right? Like you got to start somewhere, and it was fine, and I loved the clients because they were real people and not corporate banks,
Sure.
right?
When you had autonomy in that.
When I had autonomy, but I was facing the same issue, which was I was unfulfilled with the work. And so then it was like, all right, well, let's niche. So then we kind of niched, and that was Hudson Legal, right? So that was just, the stereotypical law firm, Jones and Jones, Hudson.
Right.
So we rebranded Hudson Legal and like basically put a little lipstick on the logo, and we got a new tagline. It was like moving good business forward, and so now it's just kind of like, all right, so now we're just, we're focused business, and so that was kind of the first, I guess, niche attempt. And then later we rebranded in 2021 to Sage Business Counsel to make it even more clear, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that how we talk about, I guess, building in phases and making an ideal real, it's 4 I's, but it's, you start out with imagine, you get an idea. Sometimes that could be 20 years. Sometimes that could be 2 months, it depends on probably the person and timing. But then at some point you got to take action. And so the next phase that you get into is this initiative phase where you're just doing, I have to take a step. I got to take a step. And you're just, doing the next thing that The third phase is iterate, where you start finding things that are working and you're able to build and start to grow on those. And then the final one is implement, where you're like, you're ready to actually scale and you're at some level of maturity. But I think about that, and as you were talking, I was like, okay, like if I am coming to you and I just have an idea, right? As Sage Business Counsel, there's some guidance that you can give me. Think about these things, but like at what point, and in the initiate, iterate, or implement stage, I would say, like at what point does it actually make sense? And, for me to engage you and say, okay, like there's some practical stuff here.
Yeah. A lot of it, this is the classic lawyer answer, but I'm not.
It depends.
It does depend, but I can tell you why. So you mentioned, you come from tech, right? My husband's in tech too. And, in the tech world, it's like, I'm going to spend maybe years developing a product, right? I'm just speaking like to a SaaS or, a software company, right? So I'm going to build this product. Eventually I'm going to get it to a place where I can show some investors maybe to get some seed funding. And then I know I'm going to have to keep iterating on this product over time, right? And so for a company like that, you definitely probably want to get your lawyer involved pretty early, because your entire investment into your product or code, that's your intellectual property. Right. And so you want to make sure that you really do structure the way you hold those assets in a smart way. And of course, you're probably going to be granting even convertible notes, equity of some kind. You're going to have some pretty complicated transactional relationships in the beginning. If you're like I was, you're a bootstrap, law firm or accounting firm like you got, like that is, maybe you get your contract done by your lawyer, you get your operating agreement or maybe your bylaws type of thing. And then
I don't know if you remember, Danielle, but you did my master services agreement like 6 years ago. I still use it.
Oh, good. Well, actually, I did remember that, but I can't say that. But since you said it, yes.
I said it. Yeah.
Vote for me. And I'm glad you're still using it. Good. That means hopefully it's working.
Well, I probably should get it updated, I guess, to reflect her. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you. I was going to say, yeah.
But yeah. So like that kind of thing, right? Like, your contracts are important. If you have partners, of course, you want to have those documents done by a lawyer. But a lot of bootstraps, I don't know that you really need to spend a ton of money on a lawyer in the beginning. Once you've started hiring, I'd say more than a few people, you're starting to get to about 5 people. At that point, you probably want to circle back with your attorney. Hopefully, you've got a good relationship with them. And then you want to start talking about some more robust stuff, employment law stuff, billing and collecting stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But again, that's pretty small scale help. What we try to help clients see is once you're running about $3 million in revenue a year, you probably want to consider having a more strategic and proactive relationship with your attorney. If you intend to continue to grow, because you're just getting too complicated at that point to where, and that's not always true. Some very, very small teams like e-com and stuff like that, they don't have a large need for lawyers necessarily, even though they may have high revenue. But when you do have it's a little bit of a formula type of thing, right? Like how many employees, how big is your operation, what are your growth plans? And then that kind of informs, I guess, when I would say get more consistent help.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how we sort of offer it to the clients too. It's like, look, if you're coming for a startup, we have a startup option for a bootstrap startup. If you're coming in because you need more advanced stuff, we kind of scope it more custom.
Okay.
Yeah. So did that answer your question? I don't know.
Yeah. No, you did. I mean, I think it, as you mentioned, it depends on the type of business, 2-3 million for an online store is going to look different as 2 to 3 million if you're working in construction.
Correct.
And that's going to have different implications. And
most of our clients are in construction, media, software, SaaS, and I would say if you're regulated, right,
like in alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, there are some where you got to have a lawyer from day one, and you want to kind of keep them on speed dial.
I have too many lawyers right now. I'm we're still pre-revenue. We haven't even yet sold our first, and I have lawyers in Mexico, lawyers in Texas, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, you come to really appreciate it though.
No, absolutely. I mean, because we are raising capital, so there's a group for that. We have to have, for trademarks and IP for the labels and the brands. So there's that group for filing and licensing and import licenses. There's that, and then there's we're standing up operations in Mexico. Yeah. So we have to work with somebody down there to help us make sure we are doing things well. So to build well, and I think wisely, we have to do it. Could we do it? I think by just slapping it together, probably. But
you could. But I mean,
you get into so you're not. I one of the things that I think about is the long term. I want to set up today that'll serve me in 5 years or 10 years.
Yeah.
And so that just means moving slow now. But hopefully, we can go faster. And that's probably
couldn't agree more.
I think entrepreneurs, there's that what is it? What am I thinking of? Like a cliche where they just want to go fast and break things.
Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, look, this
And
is, I was mentioning like we're about to launch our podcast, and it's exactly about this. It's exactly about that. I mean, it is literally like, listen, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to be like moral police, like I don't care what you're doing in your free time. But when you have a company, you have stakeholders. This isn't about you. Like, love you,
Right.
You're great. But you have to take your ego out of it. And the thing that I see the most is that those that are challenged by taking their ego out of it are typically the ones who may have the earliest and fastest success, but not the sustainable success.
That is a good insight and a good observation. As you
Then they
have
lose
to
it on the
manage-
back end, because then they have to hire their lawyers by the hour to fight problems. And it's like, that's a profit killer.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, yeah, no, I agree with you, Will. I think for me, too, I love what you said about the long play, right? I always talk about this with my kids. We've got 2 that are going to college next year. And I'm proud to say my son is going to college, okay? Single mom for the win, 7
Heck
years,
yeah.
baby. We
Well
made
done.
it. I mean, mad props to my husband. He's been in my son's life now for 10 years. So, he had a lot of influence there too. But I would say the thing I try to instill with them is, this is a world where everything is so easy and accessible. Like you can literally do, be, or have whatever you want, or you can at least make it seem that way, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
But, who are you trying to be in 5 years, 10 years? They can't really think super far ahead, but they can think 5 years from now, right? When I'm out of college, what do I want my life to look like? So that's now, that we get older, it's like now I'm like, well, what's the 20 year, 30 year, right? And so I think that if folks aren't thinking about that stuff in the beginning, and you don't have to have it all figured out, like I know that's ridiculous to think that you would, but if you're not thinking about that end game, I
Right.
just don't know that you can build in a way. I mean, you could build, break, rebuild, but
Right.
like, I don't
It's
know.
a lot more
Have a
pain.
solid foundation from the first day, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. So for you, Danielle, as you're looking at that, this probably centers around inspiration, but like what or who inspires you as you look at building 20, 30 years? And what do you dream of doing?
Oh, yeah. So this has changed a little. I think, so this was our 10th year. We just hit 10 years this year. And I mean, I don't want to be hypocritical or a liar. In the beginning of this whole adventure, I had really no roadmap. Now kind of, that developed. And then, so now what I'm looking at is, first of all, the industry, right? So who do I admire in my industry? There are a couple of folks. Alexander Shannara, who's a personal injury lawyer. If you go down through Alabama, you drive through all the billboards. I've seen him speak at a couple of events, and the way he views his law practice and his business is like an entrepreneur and not like a lawyer. And that, and the same thing with John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan. Those folks really do look at their business as a business and as entrepreneurs, and they're trying to grow and capitalize market share. Now, I'm not a personal injury lawyer, but I just respect that, I think, from my industry. I also respect the lawyers I know that are really focused on AI and how AI is going to change and revolutionize not just legal, but every industry, basically.
Yeah.
So there are some lawyers, Carolyn Elephant, who is a friend of mine. And I'll tell you a little side story about Carolyn, because this is kind of one of those funny things of life. She authored a book, Solo by Choice. And it's an ABA book, and American Bar Association. So it's an ABA book.
Okay.
And it is recommended by anybody who wants to go out to be a solo lawyer. This book is like number one recommendation. And so it was the very first book I read when I was going to go launch my practice. And then later I met her at the ABA's annual tech show. So there's a tech show every year out in Chicago. And I met her there, and I kind of fangirled her. And I was like, I love you, everything about, got my book. Like, you helped me so much. And then, she's also really into tech, and I am too. But she's going really deep on AI, and so I admire her. She's really forging ahead there, and challenging the status quo with a lot of the things that the legal industry at large is saying and doing with AI. There's like the dinosaurs, Thomson Reuters, and LexisNexis that kind of dominate the legal research space, and like they have these AI tools, and like they hallucinate. You may have seen some of this in the news, like lawyers that are using those tools, paying thousands of dollars a month for these tools, still getting crappy. Now, that's not to say that lawyers shouldn't be reviewing this. Okay.
Sure.
Absolutely, they should be. But sometimes you miss something, or sometimes you thought somebody else did that, and maybe you took for granted that person did it. And so now the question is, well, how many people in line are going to be checking this stuff? And then what's the, like all of this idea? So we're seeing these hallucinations with the AI in this very expensive, allegedly superior legal tech. And then she's, saying, well, I get better results from ChatGPT. And so, $20 a month and I'm in, and I can get, better results. Now, garbage in is garbage out. And if you don't know how to talk to it, right, you can't get the results she gets, right? She gets results that I probably can't even get. You know what I mean? I'm not as adept at that tool maybe as she is, but she's also somebody else I admire. And then I think just globally, like, I'm a big fan of what Megyn Kelly did and has done. I think, she was an attorney who kind of went through media, got that show at Fox, experienced her, that whole debacle, and then kind of went into her own space and charted her own path. And it seems like now maybe has commercialized some more. I don't know really exactly. I haven't actually listened to her in some time, but and I don't say that because I agree with her worldview per se, but I think that as a woman that is outspoken and willing to say the things that nobody else wants to hear from a woman. I'm
married to one of those, by the way. So.
Good for you, Will.
This is a safe space. I've learned.
Yeah. So I admire that. I admire her for standing up and saying what she wants to say.
Yeah.
And so I think for what do I see myself? So it's one of the reasons I feel like the podcast has been calling to me, I guess, too, because it's the conversations like this that I love. I mean, like talking to people that are smart, that are trying to do the right thing, trying to build a future for their families, for the world, right? And so I think just, what does it look like ultimately? I don't know. The plan with the firm is to scale it nationally, but to do that in a different way than, we talked a little bit about acquisition. So acquisition would be part of that for some of those solo shops. A lot of people that are running solo shops, as you probably know, you probably are seeing this yourselves. It's like they're not doing well. There's a lot of entrepreneurial poverty. So I want to be part of solutions for that for lawyers. People think lawyers are so rich. I'm like, no. Like the median income for lawyers is kind of abysmal when you consider the cost of the education, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So there are very, very wealthy lawyers, of course, but that it's a myth. So I'm on a mission to eradicate entrepreneurial poverty. That is the ultimate goal. And I want to do that with client work, but I also want to do it with lawyers. too.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. That is inspiring too. Like that's a big, I'm going to wake up and, it's a vision, it's a horizon. You're working towards that. You can, with your clients that you were talking about, people that they pour their life into this work, and you can help them set it up in a way to where it is protected so that they can grow. I mean, I think all those things. So that's really neat. Yeah. And I'm excited. This is our first conversation, but I'm excited that you're launching a podcast. You're going to be speaking your mind, putting things
I'm
out
gonna
there,
have you
helping
guys
people.
on.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah.
Do it. I mean, I'd love to come on. Patch, Patch will go on too. Do you want to say anything, Patch?
Well, if I can keep my internet good, I'll say whatever you want me to say, Will. No, I love the concept of, I think my connection's delayed a little bit, by the way, but I think the concept of eradicating entrepreneurial poverty is really intriguing. Yeah. And so if somebody's starting out, Danielle, like if you could give them like one or two pointers besides meet with an attorney, and I agree with that actually.
Yeah.
Like I think meeting with an attorney is super important and have and will continue to, but what other things could you give them of like benchmarks, or make sure you have this on your checklist, or stay inspired, or whatever else you would put out there?
Oh yeah. Okay. First and foremost, don't overcomplicate things. A lot of times folks will come in, well, a CPA said I should do a C Corp for this and an LLC for that, and then I'm going to do a subchapter S for this, and I'm going to have this trust over here. Well, make some money first, right? Like let's start making some money first. So the first thing is don't overcomplicate. The second thing is, be your word. We all make mistakes and things like that. If you make a mistake, own it. Acknowledge it. If you disagree with somebody, be respectful. I think a lot of times entrepreneurs are very, I don't know, they take things personally a lot. I know I did and have. So it's a big challenge. In terms of like compliance, I think, don't ignore your gut. The biggest thing that I see with folks is, oh, I thought I should be looking into that, but I didn't, or I didn't think it was a big deal. Make sure you've got your licensing. Yes, you can go to the Secretary of State or whatever the corporate registration is in your state, and you can file for an LLC or a C Corp. That's easy. That's administrative task. You have to keep your accounts separate. You cannot commingle your money, your personal money, with your business. You can contribute cash into your business account. You can withdraw your draws or your distributions from your business account, but all of that should be ledgered. Don't take your accounting for granted. Call Pat. He can help you.
Yes.
I think from document standpoint, you don't always need fancy lawyer documents. But the main things are, who are the parties, what are the terms, and what happens if something goes wrong. And if you have those three things pretty well spelled out, you'll be okay. There are obviously more complicated things that should come at some point, but that's the best in the beginning. And then inspiration-wise, I think, don't give up. Perseverance is really the most important thing, even when you're going through a crisis. So a lot of times when folks come to us and they have a bad situation on their hands, they're very desperate. They're obviously very anxious and afraid of the future and what's going to be in store for them. And the advice that I give them is, listen, you don't want to be an oak tree. You want to be a palm tree. You want to be a flexible, person that can kind of take the beating and then, not fall over when the first hurricane comes, right? So just remembering that, and and I think the other side of it too, as a lawyer, is just to say there's no problem too big if you act early. But if you let it linger and snowball, that's when you can really get yourself into some that may close down or file bankruptcy or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's not end on that note. Let's end on a more positive
note. That's not
note.
Nervous laughter. That's not what that was. Come on.
Well, no, yeah, I think, the inspirational side is, like, if you are a person of your word, then you're going to get on top of the thing right when you need to get on top of the thing, and you're not going to let it become a big problem. So, yeah, I think it kind of goes back to that idea.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, Danielle, this is awesome. BusinessCake is produced by Sound Ops. The music is written by Philip Cusius, and this is hosted by Will and Patrick. If you enjoyed it, please rate us 5 stars wherever you find your podcasts.